Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing the movie After Sun. And suddenly all these really good movies started to be released on demand or on different platforms. And I don't know, I'm really excited, and I watched this movie, and the more I thought about it, the more impactful it was. And this movie really had me thinking about, like, how much do we really know about the people we love? Right? When you think about your parents, your closest friends, the people who care about you the most, like, do we really know them as well as we think we do? This is a movie that has a lot of meaning, depending on how much you want to project onto it, right? It doesn't give you clear answers. And so there's this air of uncertainty, and you're just constantly unsettled from beginning to end. So briefly, After Sun follows a young woman named Sophie who reflects on the limited time she spent with her loving and idealistic father, Calum, when she was 11 years old. Her memories become a powerful portrait of their relationship as she tries to reconcile the father that she knew with the man that she just didn't know. And every parent, when you think about it, has a prehistory that their children will never know about. Your parents they had a whole history. They had their own lives before they had the misfortune of having us. And there's a lot of reasons. And as kids, we don't really bother to ask. And as parents, they don't really, give that information up easily, right? I don't know what your experience was, but whenever you probe into your parents' lives, they may give the answer, but it's hesitantly. It depends on your relationship with your family, but I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but anything I found out about my parents, I've had to ask, but this information was never offered up freely, if that makes sense. And then on the flip side, there's a lot that we see about our parents that we don't really alert them to. And I don't know if this is a generational thing. For example, financial woes, career failures, relationship stress. Kids can see all of that. And, we don't always alert our parents to it. And the reason for that is because, as kids, you don't really want to be an added burden onto their lives. So I've watched this movie 3 times now, and each time I've noticed something different. And I think what's frustrating about this film, and why I just, had to kind of let it be, is you're trying to piece it together like Sophie, but ultimately it's impossible, right? It's impossible, and I think that speaks to the fact that you can never really know anyone fully. But throughout the film, you see glimpses of adult Sophie in a crowded, dark dance floor searching for her father. So this image of her comes up in the beginning, middle, and end, and they kind of break up the film in such a way. And he's wearing, this is a detail I didn't even clock into, but he's wearing the same shirt that he was wearing when he was waving her goodbye at the airport, which is a different shirt than the one, than their last dance that they have towards the end of the movie. And, just the eeriness of that, right? The last time she sees her father is when she's waving him goodbye at the airport. And obviously, if she knew this was the last time she was going to see him, she wouldn't have waved him goodbye, right? She would have held him close, and they would have stayed there forever. Or she would have found a way to stay there forever. This movie is really interesting because it feels like a memory, but like a sad memory, right? You sense a lot of guilt, anger, frustration. It just hangs over the film. It's not explicitly stated, but it's there. And there's also this sense of the thing with memory, it's very selective, right? So some of the details she's picking out, it's well, what if I didn't say this? Or what if I did that instead? Or maybe this triggered him, and maybe it would have turned out differently. Maybe he would have, come back had I not done this and that. And the more she reflects, she kind of comes to the grim realization that his decision to leave had nothing to do with her. And he was battling demons that are above him, right? I think sometimes when we think about the ones we love and when they leave, you want to do something different, but oftentimes it has nothing to do with us. So it seems like the more she reflects back on her relationship with him, he had a hard time just being him, existing on this world, let alone being her father. And it seems for a time he was able to hide it well, but he could not hide it forever. And he just kind of reached this breaking point. And I think it's beautiful because as a parent, he's like any other parent, he wants to give his child the world. But as a child, he is her world, right? He's enough. I don't really care about hotels. I just care about your presence. and your absence will not make my heart grow fonder. And I think it's like a testament to like how important like the presence of a parent really is, and how nothing can really fill that void. So this movie is interesting because it's a great commentary on memory, and specifically like the unreliability of it. Because oftentimes when we look back on our past, it's like to look back on ourselves, if that makes sense. It's like these critical moments in our adolescence or whatever that made us who we are. But in this case, she's looking back to try and piece together her father's life, right? To try and get more insight, more depth into his life. But that has limitations, right? Memory has limitations in terms of us looking back on us, let alone trying to figure out who somebody else is. So the main tool that Sophie uses to help recall her memories of her father is this camcorder. And this camcorder just seems to be one of many objects that she kind of keeps around. And, you know, I'm sure she kept the Polaroids. There's a carpet that he buys almost impulsively that I don't think he could afford, that you see in, you know, Sophie's home when she's older. And I guess it was a gift, a parting gift, but we didn't see him exchange that gift. And when you think about all these items that she's kept, the camcorder, the carpet, these items are meant to remind her that he loved her. But at the same time, these memories of love have been kind of poisoned by these memories of frustration and hate, right? And the only way that she can kind of overcome them is to consciously and actively look back and, you know, confront the good, the bad, and the ugly of who her father was. So the movie begins in rewind, right? So you hear Polaroids being taken, like the sound of rewinding. So you get the sense that someone is actively looking back. So Sophie is trying to remember the last time she saw her father, right? This critical time period. And the last time she saw her father was on a vacation to Turkey. We're introduced to Sophie and Calum through a camcorder, right? Through a lens. You know, as if to say there's some barrier between, you know, not just him and the audience, but him and her in general. And in this clip, Sophie is asking her father, like, how he feels about turning 31, right? She's interviewing him. She's like, well, when you were 11, what did you want to be? You know, like, where did you see your life going? And this kind of triggers him, and the camera cuts off, and we would circle back to this footage, right? And this footage kind of sets the tone for the whole movie. And, you know, thinking about Calum's life, like, it's very much similar to this hotel room that they're staying in, right? It's dilapidated and it's out of time. From what we can tell, we don't know much about him, but he's a young father. We're not really sure what the circumstances were that led to him to becoming a young father. He's separated from the mother of his children. We don't really know why. It seems like there's some tension in the family, but nothing too chaotic or, I don't know, apocalyptic, I guess you could say. From the snippets of conversations that we hear, it seems like even Sophie's mother is concerned about Calum. Like, they seem to have some type of formal relationship, even though it's not intimate anymore. Sophie also, there's indications that she has some issues with her mother. And again, how much of this discomfort and unease is rooted in his absence, even before he leaves, I guess you could say, we're not really sure. And from what we can tell, he's a man that's kind of on the edge, right? This film kind of overlaps on his birthday. And it seems like he's getting older, but he's living a young man's life, right? He's getting in and out of relationships. His last girlfriend left him for his ex. It seems like he had plans to open up a coffee shop, and now he wants to open up a rented room in a house. Like, he seems to be like a guy with many ideas, but nothing has been set in stone, right? And you can see the anxiety that's kind of building up in him. His youth is really interesting too, because he could easily be mistaken as like anybody else on this resort. He looks like a teenager. He looks like he could be her brother. And again, it's this idea that he's getting older, he's dressing the same, and his life isn't changing, right? Like, he still hasn't found that sense of purpose. He's as lost as he was when he was 20 as he is 30, right? Like, you get the sense that in fact, it may have gotten worse. And it's really sad because throughout this vacation, you see him constantly looking at footage of their camcorder, like looking at footage of their vacation. And normally when you're looking at footage of a vacation, it's after the vacation. It wouldn't be like during the vacation. And as if to say his best days are behind him, right? He's already like mourning the end of this. as it like he's stuck in the past in some way, and what's causing that, what the deeper problems are, we will never know. And so what exactly is wrong with him? We don't know, and that's the frustrating thing about the movie. We don't know, and she will never know. But one thing is for sure, he's very good at hiding it. And a lot of parenting, especially when I look back even just on myself, like, it's very performative, right? Like, they're trying to keep your spirits up. Throughout the movie, he's like, yeah, we're gonna have a good vacation. Like, are you having fun? Like, he's really trying to keep up morale. And he's doing his best, but you could tell it takes a lot for him to keep up morale, because he can barely keep up morale for himself. He has these rituals that kind of give us some insight into his mindset, like he does Tai Chi or he does some meditation. He's always trying to get the day started, like, let's do some water polo. Like, he's really doing his best, but whenever he's alone, it seems like he can barely breathe, right? He seeks comfort in cigarettes, alcohol. It never goes overboard, but you get the sense that it could. At one point, like, you could blink and you could miss it. Like, there's so many moments in this movie where you're like, whoa. Like, he has a towel over his head. I didn't even clock that until the second watching. He's breathing heavily. Like, he's really, he's essentially like just standing on the edge of life, and he looks like he's ready to jump at any time. It seems like he suffers from frequent blackouts. He has a cast. He doesn't exactly remember how he got this cast. And then this makes sense towards the end of the movie, where I honestly thought he was going to kill himself when he went into the water, and he ends up banging his shoulder, but again, he doesn't really remember. And so he has this issue of memory, like, he kind of blacks out, and he just kind of lets go sometimes, and he doesn't really remember how. There's this feeling of like sadness and depression that runs throughout this whole movie. And I think that has to do with the fact that she has a lot of great memories. So she's recalling the great memories, but these memories are haunted by like, but why did he leave? It's hard to look back on all the good things when you don't really understand why the bad things have happened. I think the worst part of this is that not only is he absent, but it seems like he's gone, like spiritually, emotionally, like he's gone. And, during this vacation, you do get the sense that they're not always together. Like, they don't really have a lot of time where they get to see each other in person. And the way they articulate that is really beautiful. She's like, well, at least we share the same sky, right? Like, I look up in the sky and I know that wherever you are in the world, at least we're like under the same roof or under the same umbrella, which kind of gives you the sense that she wishes she had more time with her father, but at least she knows he's there. Like, his presence is there with her. And whatever happened after this trip, it seems like there's no contact, right? It seems like they're no longer under the same sky. Like, whatever happened is final, and there's nothing. His presence is not felt. There's nothing. And so there's like a lack of closure even, like, does she even know what happened to him? Like, why didn't he contact her? Like, you have all these questions. Like, as the movie goes on, you have more questions. The questions just keep piling up. And it's really frustrating because throughout this trip, like, he's bonding with her, he's reassuring her. There's all these, it's really scary because there's all these conversations about, oh, when you grow up, you can tell me anything. And their relationship is very much brother and sister. Like, they have this very friendship relationship. So not only did she lose her father, she lost her best friend. And there's a really sad scene when he's like, you can tell me anything when you get older, if you use drugs, if you go to party, whatever it is, you can tell me. And she's like, I'm not going to do any of that, but I'll let you know. So it's like, how is it that he was able to promise these things and just leave? They never had those conversations. It seems like she never was able to connect with him in that way. And that's another loss. And, the idea that he literally left her to fend for herself, right? And this whole idea of why he left, again, memory is very selective. And a part of her process, I think, of looking back is try to identify like turning points, or try to identify like, maybe something happened where I could have seen it coming. I think that's the worst part because, there are details and then there's the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is no one could have seen this coming. I don't even think he saw it coming. But again, the way she orders her memories, especially with these like dance sequences, it suggests that she's trying to piece it together. And one of the memories she kind of recalls or selects is this like self-defense class with her father. And I think it's really interesting, and it says a lot about him as a father. He was like, listen, he's trying to like teach her how to defend herself, and she's just not getting it. She doesn't really care, right? She's like, nothing's gonna happen. And besides, what if someone tries to hurt me some other way, i.e. emotionally, right? He's preparing her to survive. And I think with fathers, it's like they only care about their children's survival, right? And you see that, like, is there enough money? Is there enough, like, can she defend herself without me? Like, she'll be fine. And this focus on survival and defending yourself, it kind of undermines like the bigger picture, which is the emotional support that she no longer has, right? So the idea that like a part of her will never be happy because he's gone. And yeah, maybe she can fend for herself, and maybe, her mom and her family can take care of her, and, all in all, she was fine. But this focus on like, do you have everything you need? The answer is no, because he was the missing part, right? And again, with fathers, it's really interesting. They don't really care about your happiness, right? They care about your survival. And in doing so, you end up causing a lot of distress. And so this whole focus on, did you have a good vacation? Do you have everything you need? Again, it's him kind of overcompensating and hiding his own, like, whatever it is that's going on with him. And the thing about Sophie, and the thing with children in general, like, we don't really care about the details. You can see him apologizing for several things, like sorry about the hotel room, sorry about this and that. But she doesn't really care about the details. She doesn't really notice that this hotel is like dilapidated. It's not doing that well. She doesn't really actively attempt to make any friends. Like, there's really no agenda in her mind. And besides just chilling, right? She can't really connect with these kids because, to be honest, she hasn't been treated like a kid. But anyway, for her, it's just time to spend with her dad, time that she doesn't really have much of. And so this movie is great because on one hand, it's like a coming of age story. So throughout the film, she's trying to figure out her life. She's trying to figure out like, what's my type, I guess you could say, like figuring out this and that. But the more you look back on her, like the way she recalls this time, especially alone, there's just this air of sadness about it, right? Like, because again, she's trying to figure herself out, but in the process of doing so, she feels like she missed out on getting to know her father better, right? Like, had she known this was the last time she was going to see him, she probably wouldn't have left his side, right? This whole tension between like recalling, you know what I mean? Like, because at this point, when you look back on someone, especially in this type of situation, you get the sense that it's very difficult because on one hand, she probably wants to erase him from her memory. On the other hand, she wants to remember him, right? So throughout this whole vacation, her father is very careful to entertain her, and entertain her just enough that she doesn't notice certain details, right? Like, he's hoping that if he can put on a brave face, she's not going to notice like that he's out of money, for example. And she tries to go along with it, right? But she can't really hide her worry. And the thing that struck me is how, again, like, she's very careful with him. Right, you get the sense up until the end, like she's very careful because maybe his decision to leave doesn't come as a complete surprise. So for example, when she loses the scuba mask, she's like, listen, I know that was expensive. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do it. Like, she's always trying to reassure him in some way, go along with the fun. But for her, even this is tiring, right? Like, she's like, how much longer can I do this for? Calum seems to barely be making ends meet, and I doubt at the age of 31, he thought he would be a broke father, staying at a one-star hotel in Turkey. And I think the sad part is he takes a lot of his frustration out on himself, and the level of just guilt he feels for not giving her the world is just really weighing him down. Right, and a lot of it escalates, right? So I mean, again, we don't know what's weighing him down, but we can tell he's a man on the edge, right? So he goes diving without a license. He buys a carpet that he can barely afford. Even towards the end of the movie, like, you get the sense that he's shelling out just enough money so he can take this Polaroid picture. Like, everything he does is to kind of keep that sense of reassurance, but it's just breaking him down. And it's having the opposite effect, right? And I think as parents, like, you want to do your best to like reassure your kid, but all that does is stress out the kid, right? And it just creates even more tension. The more he tries to make it seem like a normal family vacation, the more Sophie starts to realize that it's not a normal family vacation. And one of the memories she recalls is super interesting, and I think it speaks to like how we internalize certain situations. So they come back from like a great night out, and this scene along with another one was quite striking to me. So she's like, you know, I feel down. You know, she was describing the fact that she's like, have you ever had an amazing day? And you know, the highs and she's basically saying, was the high really worth the low, right? Like, have you ever had an amazing day and everything just feels terrible and your bones are tired and you feel like you're sinking into the earth, right? You're going into the sunken place. And his reaction to that was really interesting because you could tell he was super frustrated because he's like, no, we're here to have fun. Like, that's not the issue. And the way she selects memory is interesting because you get the sense that she's partly blaming herself for things that she can't control, right? It's like, okay, so what if you opened up to your father? You know, you can't, like, you know, you don't know how he took it, right? So this memory and his reaction to this memory, you know, you get the sense that she's a bit plagued by it because it's like, was I insensitive? Could I have said something different? Like, I think it's hard when things like this happen because you wonder if you could have done something differently. And the answer again is no. So imagine if she was feeling bad as a kid, looking back as an adult, you would be like, oh my God, imagine how he felt every day, you know, with these highs and lows, right? Because he has to go months or God knows how long without seeing her, or at least that's the sense that we get. So Calum's loneliness is a void that nothing can fill, right? It seems like his family cannot fill this void. His children can't really fill this void. Even his I love yous, like, he's a man that loves his family, but he doesn't really love himself that much, right? And for that, he's really suffering. And, you know, he's kind of, again, between a rock and a hard place. Like, there are so many snippets of conversations where, you know, the eeriest one being with, you know, the scuba instructor, where he basically says, listen, I'm surprised I made it to 30, let alone 40. You know, he's kind of living every day as it is. And it seems like he's not any more sure of himself today than he was when he was 20. Eventually circle back to this clip from the start of the movie. You get the sense that Calum is done waiting, right? Like, this seems like a man who's been waiting for things to just work out, but things are not working out. And so we get back to this clip and we get the whole interview, right? So it's his birthday's coming up and, you know, Sophie's excited. She's like, listen, where did you think you would be when you were 11, right? Like, how did you think your life would turn out? And that question totally triggers him and it makes him angry. And he asks her to turn off the camera. And she's like, what? Why? Like, what's the problem? And so we get the full picture, right? And the full picture is that he definitely didn't think he'd be in a hotel room in Turkey. And so she kind of says, okay, I'll record this with my mind. And this is the first glimpse she gets into her father's background story. And again, the way this movie feels, it feels like a memory, right? It's like she's taking pieces and details and she's trying to like merge them together to give some type of depth to it, right? To try and paint a bigger picture or like try to figure out who her father was. So in this conversation, she realizes that, you know, when he was 11, no one remembered his birthday and his mother had to force his father to go buy him a present. And at the time, she didn't really understand the implication of that, right? She's like, well, that was deep and sad, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. So Calum's background story, again, the movie doesn't feed it to you, but you get the sense that he's someone who doesn't feel at home wherever he goes. And this piece of information about his birthday and then later his whole speech about what home is, right? He's someone who's never felt settled. He's never someone who felt like at ease. You know, he's searching for something, but he can't really find it, right? Whereas Sophie feels like home is home, and she doesn't really understand why he won't come home with them, right? There is that anxiety where it's like, why won't you come back? How come you don't come back? Because with Calum, first, it doesn't seem like he's stable anywhere. Second, he's alone, which is concerning, right? He's not married, he's not engaged. There's no sense of family or community around him. You know, and any sense of family and community, he's totally physically and emotionally separated himself from. And this whole conversation about home, right? Like, you'll never know where you end up. And, you know, his whole speech to her is like, listen, never say never. And she shouldn't have anything to worry about because, you know, she has so much time. And this idea of time is super ironic because it's like sure, she has time to figure it out, but if she knew she had this limited time with her father to spend, she would have asked him all the questions, right? And again, as parents, you just think about like the future of your kids. And I think with him, he was plagued, and he felt like a burden onto her, right? Like as if to say, well, you'll have so much time to figure it out, unlike me who didn't figure it out. And this idea of time is really ironic because yes, she's a kid. Yes, she has a lot of time in the world, but that's not what's important, right? Like what's important to her is this precious time she had with her father, and little did she know that this time was almost up. And I think this aura of sadness throughout the movie has to do with the fact that like time is slipping away, right? It's literally slipping away the closer we get to his birthday. And this time has to do with their time together, you know, these moments of pure happiness that eventually just go away. And the way she orders her memory, again, memory is very unreliable, right? We try to select information that helps us give us a bigger picture, and she tries to order her memories in some way, right? So you need a climax, you need a turning point. Naturally, as people, we need something to identify that says, hey, that's where it all went wrong. But to be honest, it went wrong a long time ago, right? So the way she measures this, or measures time, is through her time with her dad, right? And as the vacation kind of goes on, she finds herself spending more time alone. And looking back, she doesn't really know why she was doing that. Like I noticed, because she's looking back to understand her father, these moments alone, you get the sense that they're edited in some way because they're very uncomfortable, right? She's sitting there, she seems nervous. She seems like unsettled when she's with these friends of hers or like these older kids. But again, it's unsettled because she doesn't know what's going on with her dad. And this whole like, let's have fun, let's have a great date. You know, slowly her dad is unable to kind of keep that facade. And even with her, like slowly Sophie isn't even able to pretend, right? She gets fed up. And so on both sides, they're pretending. He's pretending that they're having a great time, and she's pretending like he's doing a great job, just so that he'll stay, right? And so they have different motivations. I think with memory, especially as we get towards the end of the movie, like there's details and there's the bigger picture, right? And a scene, you know, the whole sort of catastrophe towards the end where I really thought he was going to commit suicide, and, you know, Sophie goes off, right? So there's a moment where, you know, she's trying to have fun and do all these things, but he's fed up, right? You get the sense he's moody, he's not that happy, and his mood kind of fluctuates. And the thing with details is that, you know, this is the only time during this film where she kind of goes off on him. You know, she kind of says something to him like, don't make promises you can't keep, or don't promise things you can't afford. Like she says something quite directly to let him know, like, listen, I know you're barely doing this, and that hurts his feelings. But when you look back on something, the idea that one thing could have sent him spiraling in that direction, you know, again, it's like the burden that their absence even puts on us, right? So, you know, this is the longest that they go without each other. And the fact that her father was too tired to even look out for her, you know, like he kind of goes spiraling, he bums a cigarette, and I honestly thought he was going to commit suicide. Like I thought that was it for him. But he's gone, you know, he's spiraling, he's weighted down by God knows what. And the memory she selects is really interesting because, again, you get the sense that no matter how many times you watch this back, or no matter how many times you look back on it, you'll never really not blame yourself in some way. Or there's always a sense of guilt that you could have done something differently. But again, the bigger picture is that there's nothing you could have done. And I think there's such a thin line between love and hate. And this movie demonstrates that beautifully because on one hand, she loves him, and on the other hand, she can't believe that he did that to her. So we get to the end of the movie, and, you know, the climax, I guess you could say, is his birthday. So when he was a kid, you know, from what we gather, Calum, you know, people didn't really remember his birthday. And so Sophie makes it a point to remember his birthday. And, you know, for the most part, they seem to be having a great day. He apologizes. He says, you know, I'm so sorry for the night before. And again, what we see of Calum is that he's someone who's very hard on himself. And he took it personally that he was unable to look after her. He didn't even know. Imagine not knowing if your kid even came back to the hotel, right? He's lucky nothing bad happened to her, right? Like, and he knows that. And she's a kid. She's like, no, it's fine. Like, everything's fine now, and that's it. And she surprises him with a birthday party or a birthday song. You know, she gets all the tourists to sing him a birthday song. And the effects of that is that he's devastated and he's crying alone. And watch him crying, like, to see him crying alone. Like, I was thinking, like, imagine all the times your parents were crying by themselves. You know, like, I've never seen my dad cry. I've never seen my mom cry. I don't know about y'all, but I feel like the fact that I didn't see it means they must have, looking back on that, you know, again, it's like, it makes you wonder, like, how many times your parents or whoever you loved was just alone. And it's the people that you don't think, you know, you're like, you cried? And he's broken and he's just devastated, and whatever's weighing on him is so heavy that he's not able to move on. It was a devastating scene, right? Like, he's doing his best to mask everything to make sure she leaves on a high note. And so we get towards the end of this film and this last dance scene, and the way they shot this ending was beautiful, because first, this is the last time she sees him. They're having a great time, and if she knew this was the last time, she would have stayed with him forever, right? She kind of asks him, like, hey, what happens if we stay on vacation forever, or if we stay in hotels forever? And he's like, we can't do that. Like, that's crazy. And so, you know, watching her, like, leave with no real sense of, like, never seeing him again, I think that's what's scary about it. She didn't see it coming. You know, looking back, there were signs, but still, you know. And the final scene had to probably be, like, one of the best final scenes I've seen in a movie, right? He kind of goes off into the dark, right? Into this, like, this dark dance floor, and that's all she has of him, right? Like, pieces of memories, details that she's trying to use to construct a bigger picture that, you know, she'll never have all the pieces to. And so overall, you know, this was a beautiful movie. Again, like, you could watch it many times and there's something different to pick out, but I think ultimately the point of the story is that, you know, people are people first, and, you know, of course, like, you know, your parents have a responsibility to you, and so do your loved ones, but at the end of the day, like, there are demons that people are battling with that we can never know. And I don't think the movie was, you know, trying to sympathize. That's what I found really impressive about it. It was just trying to understand, right? Like, what was going on with him that he left his child? And the answer to that is, not only will we never know, but it's not her fault either. You know, that whatever happened is with him. And the lack of closure is devastating, but that's just life, man. Like, you'll never really know anyone fully, and you'll never have all the answers. And that's devastating. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.